are watching NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories. Israel's government has ratified a ceasefire deal with Hamas, paving the way to halt fighting in Gaza within 24 hours and free Israeli hostages within 72 hours. The agreement, backed by U.S. President Donald Trump's initiative, includes a phased troop withdrawal from Gaza as Israelis gathered at Hostage Square in anticipation of the deal's implementation. The United States will deploy 200 troops to support and monitor the ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas, according to media reports. Meanwhile, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has said that Turkey will join a task force to oversee the agreement signed in Egypt, while Israel has confirmed that prominent Palestinian prisoner Marwan Barghouti will not be part of the prisoner release deal. Russia has launched missile and drone attack on Kyiv today, plunging the Ukrainian capital into darkness, damaging infrastructure and wounding at least 9 people. According to Ukrainian officials, airstrikes have also killed a 7-year-old child in Zaporizhzhia and forced evacuations in the Donbas region. U.S. Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy has warned that air traffic controllers who repeatedly failed to report to work during the government shutdown could be fired. More than 3,300 flights were delayed on Thursday as the disruptions continued, prompting senators to urge airlines to issue refunds as government shutdowns enters its 9th day. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un has praised friendly and cooperative ties with China as he hosted Chinese Premier Li Qiang and other foreign dignitaries for the 80th anniversary of the Workers' Party. The celebrations, attended by Russia's Dmitry Medvedev, had come as Pyongyang prepares a massive military parade. Taiwan President Lai Ching-te has unveiled a new T-Dome air defense system during National Day celebrations in Taipei, aimed at providing multi-layered protection against Chinese military threats. Lai has announced plans for special defense budget this year to boost Taiwan's military capabilities amid rising cross-strait tensions. Peru's Congress has approved impeachment proceedings against President Dina Boluarte after lawmakers filed 4 motions seeking her removal. The move comes amid growing public discontent and political turmoil in the country. Sweden has announced a $367 million investment to boost its anti-drone defenses, including systems to down drones and deploy hunter drones. Amid rising aerial threats, the funding will also enhance JAS-39 Gripen fighter jets as Europe faces growing concerns over hybrid attacks. Now we start from Ukraine-Russia. Tensions continue to rise in Ukraine's Kharkov region, where local officials say attacks on civilians have intensified. According to Vitaly Ganchev, head of the Russian-installed military-civilian administration, Ukrainian forces have doubled their shelling of liberated settlements since late 2024. He claims Ukrainian troops are targeting civilians in an attempt to pressure Russian forces. Ganchev has described the situation as extremely difficult, citing daily drone and artillery strikes on homes. Meanwhile, Russian forces have carried out a massive attack on Ukraine's energy infrastructure, resulting in power outages across parts of Kyiv. According to Ukraine's Energy Minister Svitlana Grinchuk, efforts are underway to minimize the impact of the damage. According to Kyiv Mayor Vitaly Klitschko, at least 12 people were injured during the incident. Firefighters responded to first fires at a thermal power plant following multiple explosions. Tensions continue to rise in Ukraine's Kharkov region, where local officials say attacks on civilians have intensified. According to Vitaly Ganchev, head of the Russian-installed military-civilian administration, Ukrainian forces have doubled their shelling of liberated settlements since late 2024. He claims Ukrainian troops are targeting civilians in an attempt to pressure Russian forces. Ganchev described the situation as extremely difficult, citing daily drone and artillery strikes on homes. Meanwhile, Russian forces have carried out a massive attack on Ukraine's energy infrastructure, resulting in power outages across parts of Kyiv, according to Ukraine's energy minister Svitlana Grinchuk. Efforts are underway to minimize the impact of the damage. According to Kyiv Mayor Vitaly Klitschko, at least 12 people were injured during the incident. Firefighters responded to fires at the thermal power plant following multiple explosions there. Tensions continue to rise in Ukraine's Kharkov region, where local officials say attacks on civilians have intensified, according to Vitaly Ganchev, head of Russian-installed military civilian administration. Ukrainian forces have doubled their shelling of liberated settlements since late 2024. He claims Ukrainian troops are targeting civilians in an attempt to pressure Russian forces. Ganchev has described the situation as extremely difficult, citing daily drone and artillery strikes on homes. Meanwhile, Russian forces have carried out a massive attack on Ukraine's energy infrastructure, resulting in power outages across parts of Kyiv. According to Ukraine Energy Minister Svitlana Grinchuk, efforts are underway to minimize the impact of the damage. According to Kyiv Mayor Vitaly Klitschko, at least 12 people were injured during the incident. Now we are joined by Ross Feingold. He's a political analyst, joins us live from Taipei. Thank you very much, Ross, for joining us again. Good to see you. Now, how do you interpret the claims of increased civilian-targeted attacks in Kharkov region, and what might this mean for the trajectory of this war?
If Russia is going to continue to attack civilian targets in Ukraine, it's no surprise that Ukraine is going to continue to target civilian targets in Russia. So this works both ways, and it's taken a long time from the start of the war for Ukraine to be willing to do that, and also for the Western countries that provide weapons to Ukraine, for them to be on board with Ukraine pursuing that kind of strategy. But times have changed over the last few months of the war, and Ukraine is willing to do this. And it does damage morale in Russia for sure. It's humiliating for the Russian military and for the Russian government, and ultimately President Putin as well. But at the same time, we also have to keep in mind that although these kinds of attacks on civilian targets within Russia do damage and hurt morale and are humiliating for the Russian military and government, it doesn't change the facts on the ground insofar as the amount of territory Russia is holding in eastern Ukraine.
And in your view, do you see any fatigue or exhaustion from European allies in support of Ukraine now?
We're not really seeing that yet. And the focus always needs to be on the main European military and economic powers, countries such as Germany, France, United Kingdom, Italy. And there are certain countries in Europe that have been skeptics all along about providing Ukraine with this amount of military aid, countries like Hungary. And now there's a new government taking over in the Czech Republic, which has also been skeptical. The new incoming prime minister has been skeptical of providing aid to Ukraine as well. But for the most part, the European countries remain united on this issue. Will that change in the near term? Probably not, but they do have to reconcile their views with President Trump's pressure, frankly, to bring about a ceasefire or a long-term peace agreement.
And in your view, how effective are further sanctions on Russia, and also India being in the picture now? India is asked to by U.S. or pressured by U.S. to lower the crude oil purchases from Russia. Do you think this will be effective?
The broad sanctions targeting Russian companies, financial institutions, individuals, including the wealthy business leaders known as oligarchs. Obviously, that has not stopped Putin and Russia from continuing this war. So there's been wave after wave of sanctions from the United States and the European Union and other countries over the past 3+ years, but it doesn't stop the ability to wage the war. Russia still has customers for its energy. Europe, frankly, still buys some, but obviously the big buyers have become China and India. And President Trump recently increased tariffs on Indian goods as a way to pressure India to stop buying Russian oil. So far, India has been reluctant to do that, and China has continued to buy large quantities of Russian natural resources. So at least in the near term, it appears that this financial lifeline, and it really is a financial lifeline for Russia to be able to prop up its economy and continue the war, at least in the near term, that doesn't seem likely to change.
And do you think that the consequences, are there any consequences to recent Ukraine's remarks about a Russian shadow fleet?
The shadow fleet has been a reality throughout this period of war and sanctions, and it's been, again, part of that lifeline that allows Russia to bring in foreign currency and frankly, a large amount of money to prop up the economy and the military and finance the war, and as well as other government expenditures. So it's not a secret. Everyone knows about this shadow fleet. The ships can be identified, and then new ships enter the shadow fleet. So it's constantly a game of hide and seek as well. But Russia's ability to use the shadow fleet to ship its energy resources, again, that's going to continue as long as there are customers around the world. Then Russia's going to find a way to deliver a product to those customers.
Thank you, Ross, for sharing that. And now I would like to also welcome Major General Gigi Dwivedi to our discussion. Gigi Dwivedi, thank you for joining us again. Do you think there is any exhaustion or fatigue for support of Ukraine in this war? Major General, you might be muted here.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry for a little glitch.
No
Well, definitely, because the war has now gone on for about 3.5 years, and it is in state of stalemate. And there is a battle fatigue on the battlefield. There is a fatigue among the allies and partners because there is no consequential outcome. And neither the way the war is going is not likely to end up in any decisive outcome. So therefore, that fatigue among the partners and allies is quite obvious, and also fatigue on the battlefield amongst the soldiers who are fighting on both sides is also obvious. So I think that as President Putin is in no mood to end the war, so this state will continue. But as far as Ukraine is concerned, and President Zelensky has stated in no uncertain terms that kind of support he is expecting from West and America is not forthcoming. And therefore, if that be the case, it will be very difficult for Ukraine to sustain this war because Russia has more stamina than Ukraine. And I think either the European allies and America comes more forthrightly to support Ukraine. Otherwise, it's not in Ukrainian interest that the war can be carried out any further without any tangible results. Suma.
Thank you very much, Major General Gigi Dwivedi, for joining us, and Ross Feingold for joining us and sharing your insights on this topic. Now we move on to South America. Argentine President Javier Milei has thanked U.S. President Donald Trump for his vision and powerful leadership after Washington has finalized a $20 billion economic support plan for Argentina. The U.S. Treasury has announced that it had purchased Argentine pesos and established a $20 billion currency swap framework to support Milei's government, providing stability to markets without directly transferring funds to Buenos Aires. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent has stressed that the action was not a bailout and said the measures would help anchor a prosperous Western Hemisphere. The support plan boosted the peso, which rose 0.8%, and Argentine dollar bonds also climbed sharply. The move comes ahead of Argentina's October 26 midterm legislative elections, providing backing to Milei's party as it seeks to strengthen its position and implement austerity measures and economic reforms. Bessent has said that he looks forward to the meeting between President Trump and President Milei on October 14th during the IMF and World Bank annual meetings in Washington. Argentine President Javier Milei has thanked U.S. President Donald Trump for his vision and powerful leadership after Washington finalized $20 billion economic support plan for Argentina. The U.S. Treasury has announced that it had purchased Argentine pesos and established a $20 billion currency swap framework to support Milei's government, providing stability to markets without directly transferring funds to Buenos Aires. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent has stressed that the action was not a bailout and has said the measures would help anchor a prosperous Western Hemisphere. The support plan boosted the peso, which rose 0.8%, and Argentine dollar bonds also climbed sharply. The move comes ahead of Argentina's October 26 midterm legislative elections, providing backing to Milei's party as it seeks to strengthen its position and implement austerity measures and economic reforms. Bessent has said that he looks forward to the meeting between President Trump and President Milei on October 14 during the IMF and World Bank annual meetings in Washington. Now we move on to our next news. Russian President Vladimir Putin has called on the leaders of 5 Central Asian nations to strengthen their trade ties with Moscow. He has highlighted that last year Russia's total trade turnover with Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, Turkmenistan, and Tajikistan was around $45 billion. However, he pointed out this figure falls short compared to Russia's trade with Belarus alone. Let's listen into what he has said.
Прошлого года российский товарооборот с центральноазиатскими государствами с пятеркой превысил 45 миллиардов долларов. В целом неплохой результат. Но хочу обратить ваше внимание, я всегда в таких случаях привожу этот пример. Завтра примет участие в нашей работе по линии СНГ Александр Григорьевич Лукашенко. Вот с Белоруссией у нас товарооборот свыше 50 миллиардов долларов. Напомню, что в Беларуси проживает 10 миллионов человек, в Узбекистане уже почти 40, в Таджикистане свыше 10, в Казахстане там сколько уже 17, более 20. Ну, представляете, я уже не говорю о других странах. Ну, какой ресурс колоссальный, да? А это значит, есть и хорошие перспективы для развития наших.
Now we move on. Donald Trump has suggested Spain will be expelled from NATO over failure to meet 5% defense spending requirements. He has said that Spain was the only laggard and has no excuse not to comply. President Trump had added that maybe Spain should be thrown out of NATO. He also mentioned working closely with Finland and NATO, noting most countries agreed to increase defense spending almost unanimously. Let's listen into what he has said.
We're going to work together very closely with Finland and with NATO. We have a very good relationship. As you know, I requested that they pay 5%, not 2%. and most people thought that was not going to happen, and it happened virtually unanimously. We had one laggard. It was Spain. Spain. You have to call them and find why are they a laggard, and they're doing well too. You know, the funny thing, because of a lot of the things we've done, they're doing fine. They have no excuse not to do this, but that's all right. Maybe you should throw them out of NATO.
Now for this discussion, we're joined by Gautam Mukherjee. He's a senior journalist, joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much, Gautam Mukherjee, for joining us again. Good to see you. Now, how do you assess President Trump's suggestion to expel Spain from NATO? Is this only over defense spending, or do you think there are other reasons as well? Gautam Mukherjee, could you hear me? President Trump has suggested Spain could be expelled from NATO over failure to meet 5% defense spending requirement. He has said that Spain was the only laggard and has no excuse not to comply. President Trump has further added that maybe Spain should be thrown out of NATO. He has also mentioned working closely with Finland and NATO, noting most countries agreed to increase defense spending almost unanimously. Now for this discussion, we are joined by Gautam Mukherjee. He's a senior journalist, joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you for joining us again. Good to see you. Now, how do you assess President Trump's suggestion that Spain could be expelled from NATO over defense spending? Do you think that it could be, the reason could only be NATO's defense spending, or do you think there are other reasons that led to him saying this?
I don't think there's any other reason, and I don't think Spain will be expelled. This is an attempt to embarrass it into upping its defense budget. All the others who have opted doesn't mean that just from tomorrow they actually spend it. It is an indication that they are allocating money, greater money for defense, and will in due course buy defense armaments and other facilities with it. America is very keen that everybody ups the budget because NATO buys most of its equipment from America as it happens, and therefore instead of America footing the bill for all the armaments of NATO, Trump has been from the beginning pushing for the Europeans to take a larger position, and many of them have already done so, and Spain in due course will also do so.
And Gautam Mukherjee, although you say that you think this might not be the case, Spain could stay in NATO unity. Given Spain's current defense spending, also given Spain's stance about a Palestine and Israel conflict, do you think that could have maybe be a reason as well?
It might be a minor footnote, but the principal players in Palestine, Gaza, Israel are Israel and the United States. It doesn't much matter what other people say. If anybody is an important factor to consider, it would be Iran, it would be Lebanon, it would be all the countries, Houthis in Yemen. These are the people who are supporting Hamas and Hezbollah, and they are currently also muted. So I think for the time being, the ceasefire, which is under negotiation, will probably happen and hold down the road, what happens is another matter. But whether people in Spain want to support the Palestinians, it makes little difference.
I see. And Gautam Mukherjee, if you could tell us a little bit about how much is Spain contributing to NATO as of now?
I think it's under 2%.
And is it a major player in NATO?
Well, Spain's economy is not very strong. So the main players are, of course, France and Germany. And they have been persuaded to increase their defense spending. So they take care of the most of it. The others also contribute, have also raised their contribution, those who have recently joined NATO also. So yes, Trump's requirement that NATO put a larger part of the costs for the defense of Europe has been achieved to some extent and is an ongoing process.
And lastly, do you think what can Spain do diplomatically or strategic steps so that it can avoid any tensions with the US or NATO?
Well, I think it's a matter of bilateral negotiations. There are things that the Spanish want from the United States and from the other states of NATO. Those could be met to some extent, and Spain could agree to, if not up it to 5%, at least up it from 2% to maybe 3%, and then approach 5% in a staged manner, maybe over 2 or 3 years.
With that, I would like to thank Gautam Mukherjee for joining us and sharing that insight on this topic. Now we move on to Asia. Taiwanese President Lai Ching-te has vowed to speed up construction of a multi-layered air defense system as part of efforts to counter enemy threats. Lai's government has been under U.S. pressure to improve its ability to defend itself against a potential attack by China, which claims the island is part of its territory. During Taiwan's National Day celebrations, Lai has said that we will accelerate our building of the T-Dome, establish a rigorous air defense system in Taiwan with multi-layered defense and high-level detection, as well as effective interception. He's also stated that Taiwan was determined to maintain peace through strength and called on China to renounce the use of force or coercion to change the status quo. Across the Taiwan Strait, let's in fact listen into what Lai Ching-te has said.
我们有决心透过实力维护和平，我们也深信实力不只要透过军力，也要透过全社会的韧性。我们也期待中国能体现大国的责任，停止扭曲联合国大会第2758号决议以及二战历史文件，并且放弃以武力及胁迫方式改变台海现状，共同维护印太和平。
Now we move on to our next news. Multiple airstrikes by Pakistan has reportedly struck Kabul, the Afghan capital, marking a sharp escalation in tensions between Islamabad and the Taliban government. The strikes came just hours after Defense Minister Khawaja Asif warned that enough is enough, accusing Afghanistan of harboring militant safe havens behind recent cross-border attacks. According to reports, explosions were heard across parts of Kabul, though Taliban officials say there's no confirmed damage or casualties. The development follows weeks of rising friction over cross-border militancy and growing Pakistani frustration with what it calls the Taliban's inaction. This is all we have time for. We will continue to bring you more news updates from around the world.